Hello, this is Kim Gi-yoon from the Master's Program of Yonsei ELL. Welcome to my video, which I titled The Dark Side of Colonial Modernity, a post-colonial analysis of Cymbeline and the Tempest. Today, I aim to delve into the underlying dynamics of epistemic power within the construct of modernity, revealing its inextricable link with the discourse of colonialism. Based on this lens of colonial modernity, an analysis of the pivotal English dramatist William Shakespeare's works can unveil his depiction of the symptoms and complexities of the modern era. As a Renaissance writer who lived during a transformative period, the cherished playwright navigates the issues of imperial identity and foundation, colonial expansion, encounters between the native and the colonizer, as well as the power dynamics embedded in it. Among his vast number of works, I'll particularly focus on Cymbeline and the Tempest, where these themes prominently emerge. After describing what colonial modernity refers to, I will briefly explain the history of the UK for reference. After that, I will dive into a detailed analysis of the plays and wrap up the video by sharing the conclusion of the points I have made. In the field of humanities, modernity extends beyond its temporal categorization as a historical epoch, encompassing a distinct mode of consciousness. In his essay, An Answer to the Question, Immanuel Kant defined enlightenment as man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity. This encapsulates the key point of Western modernity, which is the belief in the autonomy of the individual drawing from God, logos, reason, and truth. The Renaissance period, specifically the late 16th century, is commonly marked as the beginning of internal modernization within Europe. This transformation involved a critical examination of traditional authority, which gradually gave way to the primacy of reason and freedom. Various domains, including science, philosophy, literature, economics, and politics, underwent a significant shift during the era. The essence of this transformative perspective can be represented by the spirit of humanism. The notion of placing humanity at the core of ethical and intellectual consideration manifests as a self-perception of novelty. However, the human in modernity is deceptive in the sense that it accompanies the other in its process of rebirth. It distinguishes people from humanitas and anthropos, only placing the former in the spotlight of transition while shoving the latter in the shadows. The Argentinian decolonialist Walter Mignolo exposes colonialism as an intrinsic outcome of modernity in his acknowledged book, The Darker Side of Modernity, which I refer to in my video title. He says, "Who establishes criteria of classification and who classifies? Those who inhabited the epistemic zero point and were the architects of global linear thinking. And who were classified without participating in the classification? People who inhabit the exteriority." This differentiation between the anthropos and the humanitas is reinforced by the modern interpretation of time as a linear framework. Mignolo encapsulates this phenomenon by the following quote, "History as time entered into the picture to place societies in an imaginary chronological line going from nature to culture, from barbarism to civilization, following a progressive destination towards some point of arrival." I have visualized below in a simple way to show the straightforward trace of the intangible arrow that splits the world into two temporalities, with Europe in the present and the rest in the past. Here, the Argentinian decolonialist is drawing from the concept of denial of coevalness from the German anthropologist Johannes Fabian. Simply put, coevalness is a sharing of the present time, which is a vital dimension for unbiased epistemic relations between subjects. When the denial of coevalness occurs, the group or individual whose coevalness has not been acknowledged, the anthropos, is confined in a position of disadvantage where their arguments and opinions are the subject to the perception that they are inherently inferior or less advanced. In contrast, those who inhabit the epistemic zero point, the humanitas, fashion global linear thinking, holding the key to knowledge control. In this line of logic, Modernity unavoidably entails the systematic differentiation with the anthropos as the other, so as to endow humanitas with the ability to sapere aude, dare to know. The crux of the matter is that this formation of modernity is tied to coloniality in the sense that it translates disparities in space into disparities in time as a product of colonial power. The distinction between the anthropos and the humanitas, the departure from traditional customs as a subject of cogito, has risen as a result of and as the justification for intercultural interactions characterized by imperial dominance. Hence, modernity and coloniality are two different sides of the same coin. Colonial modernity, in essence, can be defined as the epistemic shaping of a single universality of these Eurocentric concepts for hegemonic control. Now let's look at the ambiguous root of Britain as an empire. In contrast to the British Empire's self-image as a superior nation of pure and civilized ethnicity during its peak expansionist phase, England's historical trajectory reveals a complex process of hybridization. The name Britain itself was given by the Romans, who established their rule from AD 43 until 410. This was followed by subsequent invasions and settlements by the Anglo-Saxons and Vikings during the 5th to the 11th centuries. The Norman conquest occurred in 1066, and the Tudor Stuart period followed the Norman conquest. The absence of a native classical past was one of the great intellectual obstacles to the pathway to the recovery of national origins in Renaissance England. Reflecting this social concern, Cymbeline withholds the desire to establish a kind of historical continuity while, at the same time, also breaking apart and overcoming the ancient Roman Empire. As Michelache puts it, in early modern England, an originary engagement with Rome was necessary for the formation of an autonomous national identity. This attests to the interpretation of the play as embodying the debate of early modern English nationalism. King Cymbeline's contradictory behavior towards Rome and Caesar should be noted in this context. In Act 3, Scene 1, right before the line I put here on the left, the Queen and her son Cloten claim that it is time to put a stop to paying tributes to the Roman Emperor, arguing that Britain's a world by itself and we will nothing pay for wearing our own noses. They are emphasizing the independence Britain deserves without the intervention of the empire. To this, Cymbeline responds to Caius Lucius, the messenger of Caesar, with the following lines: "You must know, till the injurious Romans did extort this tribute from us, we were free. We do say then to Caesar, our ancestor was that Milmutius, which ordained our laws, whose use the sword of Caesar hath too much mangled, whose repair and franchise shall, by the power we hold, be our good deed, though Rome be therefore angry." He refers to Milmutius, the first king of Britain, to insist that his purpose of rebellion against Rome would be to restore the state that had its own laws and culture prior to Rome's arrival, thereby reviving the ancient laws and continuing the British spirit. By doing this, Shakespeare is depicting a what-if to the ancient nation and underlining the preservation of the national root. However, instantly after Lucius announces this act shall inevitably lead to war, Cymbeline is reminiscent of his childhood in Rome. He talks about the time he spent there when thy Caesar knighted him and helped him learn the way of gathering honor. This juxtaposition sets him as a Romanized British king who is thereby fitting to be the inheritor of Translato Imperii, transfer of empire from Rome, and lead a new Britain. As pointed out by Capilia Khan, one can notice that Britain's relationship with Rome expressed both identification and rivalry. The ambivalent attitude towards the empire thus deviates from the conventional hostility between the conqueror and the conquered, introducing intimacy and fraternity instead. With a plethora of nationalities, political sides, and personas colliding with one another, the drama rushes to combine these significantly dissimilar and ahistorical elements to incorporate into a grand reconciliation. Even though fictional Britain has won the war, Cymbeline ironically announces that they will submit to Caesar and to the Roman Empire and will promise to pay their wonted tribute. He makes sure to pay respect and thanks to the Roman gods by making offerings from their best altars, thus announcing peace to society with a Roman and a British in sine wave friendly together. The fraternal unity between the empire and its vassal nation not only embodies a vision of peace, but also conveys a sentiment of historical and cultural continuity. From this perspective, Cymbeline can be interpreted as a play that portrays the transition from the Roman Empire to the British Empire as a seamless and unproblematic progression. It presents the historical integration of Britain into the Roman Empire as a voluntary act, despite being a misrepresentation of the actual circumstances. Thus, Cymbeline implies that the kingdom can change its name from Britannia to England and start to reinvent itself as a modern nation, but only by shedding its ancient and noble past. The messy and confusing mixture of events in the play reflects the political and social atmosphere during those times. If Cymbeline was a play that addressed the issue of the imperial basis of modern England, The Tempest focuses on the encounter of the native and the settler, a scrutinization of the anthropos distinct from the humanitas through the persona of Caliban and Prospero. The island where Prospero and his daughter Miranda are exiled is under Prospero's complete control. From his position of authority, the sorcerer orchestrates schemes and manipulates characters to execute his plan for revenge against his enemies and achieve political reinstatement. So it seems like he's almost the stage director of the entire play. In Act 3, Scene 3, a spirit named Ariel, who serves Prospero, parrots the sorcerer's words and discloses the wizard's meticulous plot. For which foul deed, the powers delaying not forgetting have incensed the seas and shores, yea, all the creatures against your peace, whose wraths to guard you from, which here in this most desolate isle else falls upon your heads, is nothing but heart sorrow and a clear life ensuing. On the island there are two natives, Ariel the spirit and Caliban the slave. While both are under Prospero's mastery, the contrasting treatment becomes evident right from their initial appearances on stage. Enter Ariel like a water nymph. Prospero. Fine apparition, my quaint Ariel, hark in thine ear. Ariel. My lord, it shall be done. He exits. Prospero to Caliban. Thou poisonous slave got by the devil himself, upon thy wicked dam, come forth. Enter Caliban. Later, Miranda condemns that even though she pitied him and took pains to make him speak, taught him each hour, Caliban would gabble like a thing most brutish. He is innately unable to learn and thus belongs to the savage backward point in the location of modern epistemology, dependent on the intellectual guide of the humanities. The English poet John Dryden commented that Caliban has all the discontents and malice of a witch and of a devil, whose body is filled with deadly sins, gluttony, sloth, and lust. Being bred up on a desert island, he has striking ignorance and monstrous personality, distinguishing him from other mortals. And, in other words, Caliban is everything that the humanities wants to deny. He is the anti-humanitas. Furthermore, the colonial fantasy of the Europeans is eminent in the play as well. The Italians, Trinculo and Stefano, mistake Caliban as a strange fish and plan on selling him to Naples, displaying the desire common during the era among European explorers towards the exotic non-European. Trinculo, after noticing Caliban, asks, "What have we here, a man or a fish, dead or alive?" "A fish. He smells like a fish, a very ancient and fish-like smell, a kind of, not of the newest, poor John, a strange fish. Were I in England now, as once I was, and had but this fish painted, not a holiday fool there but would give a piece of silver. There would this monster make a man." Stefano comments, "This is some monster of the isle with 4 legs, who hath got, as I take it, an egg. Where the devil should he learn our language? I will give him some relief, if it be but for that. If I can recover him and keep him tame and get to Naples with him, he's a present for any emperor that ever trod on neat's leather. Hearing the men's voices, Caliban initially begs them not to hurt him, and then begins to worship Stefano as a brave god, deciding to kneel to him after taking a sip of the Italian's alcohol. He consistently responds with a subservient attitude, faithfully performing the standardized image and role of the oppressed. Here, you can see Caliban commenting after drinking from Stefano's bottle. He says, "These be fine things, and if they be not sprites, that's a brave god and bears celestial liquor, I will kneel to him," and then asks, "Hast thou not dropped from heaven?" Then he becomes very enthusiastic to prove his self-worth to the man. "I'll show thee every fertile inch of the island, and I will kiss thy foot, I prithee be my god." This draws a sharp contrast with Trinculo's reaction, who immediately feels suspicious of Caliban and treats him lowly. He says, "By this light, a most perfidious and drunken monster, when God's asleep, he'll rob his bottle." Caliban still continues pleading, "I prithee, with my long nails will dig thee pignuts, show thee a jay's nest, bring thee to clustering filberts," and finally asks, "Wilt thou go with me?" To this plea, Stefano reacts without much care and instead begins thinking about ruling the island. "I prithee now lead the way without any more talking. Trinculo, the king and our company else being drowned, we will inherit here." This depiction of the characters supported the French psychiatrist Octave Manoni to argue in his book Prospero and Caliban that there is more than simply economic benefit as the motivation for colonialism. Instead, he suggested that there is satisfaction in the psychological desire of both the oppressed and the oppressor, namely operated by the dependence and inferiority complex. Simply put, the dependence complex is the want of individuals to create a dependent relationship with a superior figure, and this is prone to manifest among the Orient or the colonized. On the other hand, the inferiority complex is a typical Occidental personality, only achieved when the individual is confident in the face of abandonment, which he has converted into independence. This mindset of overcoming is what acts as a driving force of Western hegemonic progression, and the difference in the psyche of the colonized and the colonizers explain why imperial dominance is reasonable. In this line of thought, Caliban's resentment towards Prospero in Act 1 might have stemmed from the feeling of betrayal when Prospero abandoned him. He says, "When thou camest first, thou strokest me and made much of me. Wouldst give me water with berries in it, and teach me how to name the bigger light and how the less, that burn by day and night. And then I loved thee, and showed thee all the qualities of the isle, the fresh springs, brine, pits, barren place and fertile, and here you stay me in this hard rock, whilst you do keep from me the rest of the island." With the psychological loss of Prospero as the once caring figure who guided him, Caliban is depicted as a lacking figure in need of another superior master to depend on, since he cannot face the fear of existing as an independent agent, according to Manoni's theory. Hence, the logic that the unstable, ignorant anthropos requires the control of the autonomous, rational humanitas is built. In his book Black Skin, White Masks, the Martinic psychiatrist and post-colonialist Frantz Fanon rebuts the claims of Manoni throughout the chapter, The So-Called Dependency Complex of Colonized Peoples. To quote, he writes, "But since this is Monsieur Manoni's point of departure, why does he want to make the inferiority complex exist prior to colonization? Here we see the mechanism at work in psychiatry, which explains there are latent forms of psychosis that become evident following a traumatic experience." His main argument is that Manoni is trying to make the inferiority complex something that antedates colonization, positioning the colonists as a figure the colonized anticipated. Fanon contends that the colonial situation itself disrupted the traditional consciousness structure in the colony, making it contradictory to apply that traditional structure to the post-colonial context after encountering the West. In other words, the natives after the appearance of Europeans are different from those before it. Here, it is important to note that Fanon does not deny the presence of an inferiority complex among colonial natives. Instead, he emphasizes that this complex is a result of colonial history rather than its cause. The true underlying cause of the dependency complex lies in the social structure that systematically fosters the reliance of black individuals on white individuals. This is applied to the concept of anthropos and humanitas as well. In Fanon's words, it is the racist who creates his inferior. Shakespeare's portrayal of Caliban can therefore be seen as open to criticism for misrepresenting the colonized solely from a Eurocentric perspective as a dehumanized other. To conclude, modernity entails the colonization and otherization of the non-Western in the sense that it locates the humanitas at the forefront of space, time, and the epistemic starting point. While it may be imprudent to categorize Shakespeare solely as an imperialist or colonialist, owing to the ambivalence in his works, the analysis above reveals elements within plays of Cymbeline and the Tempest that reflect the ideology of colonial modernity during his turbulent era in England. Minono asserts that the process of decolonizing Western epistemology is to recognize that the concepts of humanitas and modernity do not arise from an ontological essence. It is to be aware that these notions serve as tools for those in control of categorizing thoughts and producing knowledge to assert their authority by marginalizing and disqualifying those who are deemed deficient, both in terms of reason and ontology. These are the works that were cited throughout the presentation. Thank you very much for listening and for checking out my video. I hope it helped. With the ambition of contributing to the deconstruction of Eurocentric illusions, I conclude this presentation. Bye!